although
Well, hi, Mike. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
yeah, my name's Mike, Mike Watts. I'm based in London, 62 years old, just recently. And as I mentioned in our preamble off camera, I did study sciences at school, but didn't take up a place at university because at the time of being a teenager, you know, things like sort of rock and roll start to become more attractive, and little did I know one could easily have gone to university and still been in bands and things like that. But my decision making at that age wasn't terribly good, and in some respects I do regret it still, in that one of the careers I possibly would have been very satisfied would have been in the sciences and possibly even in the space program, although the chances of a British guy going to work at NASA were less then. That weren't impossible, and there have always been a smattering of Brits at NASA, and now of course we've got other space agency space company options, and of course we've got ESA as well in Europe. I mean, I was having a drink a couple of years ago, and the guy in the late night bar said he hunted near-Earth asteroids for ESA, and I was like, oh man, that's such a cool job, although it must be incredibly repetitive. And but like every work has got its dull, repetitive, you know, building foundations work until suddenly there's a eureka moment. And all of science and engineering's like that, and long period. In fact, just about everything in life is kind of like that, long periods of dull kind of work till suddenly there's like a goal, a victory, you know. And so in the end, after mucking around with, you know, music and rock and rolly type things, I eventually wanted to do something that was kind of quite serious. And weirdly enough, I got involved in a group who ended up going big into like telemarketing and then call centers, which is about communication, I discovered, and communication between humans is a scientific thing. There are things you can study. So there was some, you know, gratification and satisfaction in that. Plus it kind of ended up being a career. I could zoom around the world and go to all the English speaking countries and do work in and a few other non-English speaking countries. So that's took up the majority of my adult working life. And I feel like since lockdown, I feel semi-retired, and I've spent a bit more time recently doing recording and music-y and arty type stuff, which is always, I think art is always the other side of the balance, the work-life balance, you know. So that's, you know, fascinated me. But I do have more time now. I'm not traveling on work, and I'm only going to help out a couple of dudes with their marketing and stuff. Well, lawyers they are, a couple of days per week. So that in, you know, 2 minutes is sort of a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're the type of person that probably creates those tunes that get stuck in your head and you can't get them out, and you're like hearing this song all the time is like, you know, would that be true?
Well, I have written some music for adverts and for fashion shows that's been used, and yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope so from time to time that I've written stuff. I mean, occasionally a friend will say, oh, I was thinking of this song, you know, because I play at an amateur level. I'll go out into pubs and things like that, and, you know, and people will hear things, and then occasionally a friend will say, oh, I had that tune of yours in my head. So yes, but let's get back to the kind of meat of the subject today, shall we?
Well, it actually, I'll tie it in. But first of all, did you know that NASA is planning to send people to the moon?
Send people back to the moon. Yes, I did. Yeah.
And would you believe that most of the people I talk to, like at the coffee shops, on the street, you know, non-space people, people that are not a member of Space Hipsters Facebook group, they do not know. I would say to a ratio of about 80 to 20%. Like only you go out in the world, and at least in my world, maybe it's my own failure to market, only about 20% of the people know that we're planning to send people back to the moon.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, was that in Houston? Would that survey was taken?
Well, it's not so much a survey as my anecdotal experience of going to random people. And, in February of 2020, I actually went to London, New York, and Edinburgh. So it actually includes a little bit of people from your part of the world. So.
Well, it doesn't really surprise me. And as I've got older, I've come to realize that an awful lot of people don't know an awful lot of things about the actual world that they live in. They don't know much geography. They don't know much cosmology, about what's out there, and things that they do pick up are usually through popular culture. My son is 10 and lives in the Netherlands, and we talk a fair bit about space, or rather I try and indoctrinate him a fair bit about space. And then he said to me something he heard at school, or more likely these days seen on YouTube. And he said, "Is it true there are 2 robots on Mars?" And when he says it like robots, you think these humanoid type things. But yeah, sure, there are. In fact, there's a whole load more than that, although some of them are now dead, so to speak. But yeah, when you put it like that, there are robots on Mars, and that sounds pretty cool when you hear it from a 10-year-old's point of view. So no, it doesn't totally surprise me that people didn't know we were planning to go back. And when you ask people about the first time we visited the moon, they don't know an awful lot about it. They don't know how many people landed, and they don't know how it was done. And in fairness, it wasn't until I was perhaps 30 or something that I kind of went, how did they act? Okay, I watched the launches and the coverage and read articles and things like that when I was much younger, when it was happening. But I really wanted to know how it actually works. How did the staging of a rocket happen? How did they actually how did the guidance work? And so I started buying books, and until I kind of brought my knowledge up to a certain satisfactory so I satisfied my curiosity, and then I found I was a space geek just by doing that, compared to other people anyway.
Well, I just discovered this podcast done by the BBC. It was released in 2019 as the 50th year anniversary for the first time we went to the moon, and it's called 13 Minutes to the Moon. I was wondering if you've heard of it.
I've heard it. And they started that was about Apollo 11. And yeah, it's good in some respects. I really like the graphics on the cover, with that kind of moon with the 30. I like that kind of minimal 1960s style, sort of slightly, what was that? Bebop style kind of graphics. But apart from that, yes, it's really good. Yes, it's good that they were doing a commemorative production. No, it's not so good in that because it's serialized, they keep going over, last week we covered this and we got to this point, and then they kind of, the stops and starts at the beginning and the end are really clunky until you get to the mid. So if you try and listen to it in a binge listen, it's very repetitive. And I say it that I know he's an enthusiast, but the main presenter is just slightly grating and slightly labors. I don't, the delivery. We've got 1 or 2 presenters here. Dear old Brian Cox, who does his, Professor Brian Cox, who has done a wonderful series of television series here about the mystery of the solar system and the universe and the cosmos and things like that. It's like they've got a certain amount of script and they really spin it out over, and instead of going, well, this happened, then that happened, they try and make everything really dramatic. And I think 13 Minutes to the Moon slightly suffers from that. But did you know they did one on Apollo 13 as well, but didn't finish it due to lockdown? And I don't know, has it been completed and broadcast?
I know that, I saw about 7 or 8 episodes of season 2. I'm not sure that's completed or not. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but on Apple Podcast, I do see the season 2, and I've been listening through the Apollo 13 one as well.
I mean, the BBC and the British television production companies have always done a sterling job of coverage. I mean, if you think of James Burke back in 1969 and so forth, you know, he's still a bit of a legend. I think James Burke is still alive, but, you know, the BBC's coverage was very good back in those days, you know, because the BBC, at least then, was, you know, was a top class broadcaster. We didn't have commercial breaks, still don't on the BBC, supposedly, although the BBC is under threat the whole time by, you know, right-wing governments wanting to commercialize it and make money and sell it off. But it is one of the family heirlooms of Britain, and it's a world cultural sort of heritage thing. I think the BBC should be protected, but unfortunately, you know, their news coverage can't be trusted these days because they're always under threat from the government that if you say stuff we don't like, we'll remove your franchise. You will have to carry advertising just like everyone else, and it'll ruin the continuity of the programs as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, so I did know we were going back. I did watch Apollo 11, 13 minutes to the moon. Yes, it's all good. Yeah, all that stuff's great.
How old were you whenever we first landed on the moon?
9.
And what did you, so that's the same age as your son. I mean, roughly. I mean, your son's a little bit older
roughly,
than
yeah,
you.
yeah, it is, yeah. I think if they were to land again now, okay, well, it's not going to happen now, and it's probably not going to happen in 2024 either. But say, although I think a flight round the moon might happen by 2024, but yes, I think it probably will, because so is that going to be an Artemis craft that does that round the moon flight? Because isn't there going to be one of the private companies is planning to go round the moon, aren't they, soon?
And that's right. SpaceX is planning to, so there's that Japanese billionaire that just went up to the ISS on the Soyuz rocket. He just arrived, I think, today or yesterday. Yakuza Miyazawa, I think that's his name. You have
to remember these things for your recordings. I don't.
But he's paid SpaceX to send a group of artists around the moon in Starship, the new
artists.
Yeah, and he's calling it Dear Moon, and it's supposed to launch in 2023. But you know, Starship hasn't actually made it to orbit yet.
I know.
They have a long road, you know, to create like the life support and everything else that they need. So.
Look, you know what problems we had with the thermal tiles on the shuttle. That lasted for years and dragged back the launch of it for I don't know, 4 or 5 years or something. I don't think they've cracked it. They can't even do a test fire without tiles popping off.
Yes.
It's yeah, long road is probably what it's going to be. But if they can crack it, you know, all these graphics they're putting up of, like, you know, 100 starships flying through space at the same. Yeah, right. Really? I mean, this isn't Disney, you know, or any of those sort of space franchises. Yeah, if they can crack it. But I think, I mean, I don't. We're going to run out of time. But my thoughts are, yes, I think something like a flight round I think that's more likely to happen in an Artemis / Orion type vessel than in Starship in that time frame. I mean, I kind of hope I'm wrong, you know, but instead of this huge thing that could have a capacity of 100 people, they're probably going to be in an Apollo-sized capsule with 3 or 4 people or whatever. But that would still be an amazing thing to do, and the very sensible thing to do, to go round the moon first, because of all the additional, you know, weight and energy costs of actually landing and departing from the moon again.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, Artemis 1 is on the pad, ready to be launched. Well, I mean, it's not on the pad. It's in the vehicle assembly building right next to the pad, all stacked up, ready to be rolled out and launched in February. It's not going to have any people on it, but all the equipment for Artemis II is already built, and it's just a matter of putting it together. So if February works out well, you know, a very good chance that Artemis II with 4 astronauts, one of which should be Canadian, the first Canadian astronaut to go around the moon. Um, uh, I think you're definitely right.
It'll be great, and I think my son will be interested in that. But you know what kids are like? It takes, I mean, there was much less distractions when I was 9 or 10 years old than he is. I mean, he's put up his own YouTube channel in since his birthday, and we gave him his first phone and got up to like 40,000 views, which is not bad for a 10-year-old. So there are other distractions and games that are much more intense than just sitting passively watching or following news reports and things. But I hope they make the coverage really good and or high def, broadcasting and everything like that, because that's okay. They got it together by like Apollo 15 and onwards, but before that, the visual coverage of the landings. Okay, it was amazing to see live TV from the moon, even though it was like dodgy, interleaved, very shadowy, ghostly images coming from Apollo 11. And then we had things like I've kicked the lead out on whether it was, I forget whether that was 12 or 16 or 14 or whatever, when there were no broadcasts at all from the surface of the moon. But they got it together. And I mean, I still think the fact that the Lunar Roving Vehicle, or LRV, I think that was an amazing, not just a cool piece of kit, but enabled them. The fact that they went, they drove 11 miles and got up to 5 or 6 miles from the lander. I mean, if I just walked 5 or 6 miles from where I live, I'd be quite a long way away. I probably wouldn't even know what the streets were, or maybe not, depending which direction I went in. I mean, that's quite a long way. I mean, to get to that level of sophistication is going to take, I think, whether it can be a one nation exercise this time around. Well, it looks like it's going to be anyway, the NASA attempt, but when do you think they're going to get back down onto the surface?
Well, we have NASA formally saying that it's going to be 2025. NASA has an independent group called the Office of Inspector General. It's like a watchdog group that's supposed to, provide an external assessment on NASA's plans and budget and management and all this stuff. They're saying that they don't think it's going to be any sooner than 2027, just based upon how all the contracts and development and history and everything. So I'm hoping it's before 2030. I think it would be really sad to go another decade without anybody on the moon.
One of the things that came through in that book by Weir called Artemis is that it was the colonization of the moon, in his view, would happen when there's a commercial return for it. Okay, there could be a small scientific base like we have at the South Pole in Antarctica. And if we can have a year-round base in Antarctica, which you can't get to without flying, it's hostile conditions a lot of the time, there are similarities. Then I don't see why we can't have a scientific, I think that'll happen first, a kind of scientific base. I hope it does. I think the idea of it being at the South Pole is interesting. I mean, I think part of the motivation for that is to be near potential water sources, even if it's hydrates or whatever these compounds are called, which then can lead to the possibility of those being separated to produce oxygen and hydrogen. Again, in the Artemis book, they're talking about using the actual regolith, if that's how you pronounce it, to break that down and produce oxygen as a byproduct, and all of this good stuff. But I think in terms of a colony, as opposed to just a base, I think it's going to have to be if there's a commercial payback. And whether there's the prospect of that on the moon, I don't know. I mean, is there a lot of lithium on the moon or something? But also, anything you could mine up there to get it back to Earth, incredibly expensive, but and extremely costly and resource hungry. But if it can be utilized on site, then that's a sort of game changer. You know, if you can end up with a colony that's sort of self-replicating, you can build the buildings out of the stuff that's around you, which if you think about civilization spreading around the globe, people built with what was there. That's why you get differing architecture around the world. Some people are making buildings made out of dried mud bricks. Other people, like in the UK, they would chop down trees, have a wooden frame and fill it in with, you know, wicker and mud and stuff like that, and dried bull's blood and straw and, you know, wattle and daub and all of that, thatched roofs, or unless you're a place where there's slate. So you just use the resources that were there. You know, the Plains Indians would have what, teepees made with like buffalo hides and things like that. So, you know, people weren't, it's unsustainable to have to bring everything in. Where things are in 500 years, that's too much of a leap for my mind at the moment. I mean, I can comment on it, but it's so speculative. I do think that serious interplanetary exploration and colonization will require people to kind of settle down a bit on Earth. You know, I think if we could, I mean, most of the problems we're facing right now seem to be sort of related to, okay, I mean, you know, we've got the fossil fuel burning problem, which might be cured by sort of fusion or just increased efficiency. But also you've got massive, I think, overpopulation, which is causing a huge drain on the natural resources. You know, people are still harvesting the virgin forests like it's, you know, like we can go on doing that for a long time without there being any nasty effects. But in the short term, and whether it's in my lifetime, this thing about the settlement, colonization, bases, I know a lot of people are fairly enthused about Mars. I'm not one of them right now, because if we can't do it on the moon, it's going to be a hell of a lot more dangerous and difficult to do it on Mars. And is there much more benefit on being on Mars than there is on the moon? I mean, are they supposed to be richer? Is the geology supposed to be so much better?
Well, you do have a little bit of an atmosphere, not much. I mean, it's like being higher altitude than the highest peak on Earth. So
1/100th of our atmospheric pressure doesn't sound like much of an atmosphere to me.
The temperature is a little bit more moderate. The day is slightly longer than our day, as opposed to being 14 days. But I do need to wrap it up. I had one last question for you. If it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
I think I would, although I'm going to be probably too old until that becomes available. It's not affordable. You know, one could apply and go on a Carmen line kind of adventure, but all of that money for 5 minutes. Although I love the impression it left on William Shatner when he got back, and his loquaciousness, his erudition on the subject. Although it was pretty bad to see the sort of organizers going like shut up, William, have some champagne and just look like you're having a good time, when he was going, oh, just see eternity above and life below. You know, getting all thespian about it, but naturally being like that. That was a joy, actually. And then the stupid organizers going, yeah, whatever. Have some champagne and go whoop, whoop, won't you? That kind of pissed me off, as you can probably tell. Yeah, but a trip round the moon, just to view it up close, to go into orbit for a bit. I hope they go into orbit. I mean, do you know what the plan is for that Japanese guy's crew? Are they going to go into orbit or just loop?
I think it's a free return trip, just loop. Go around the backside, come back here. But, you know, honestly, though, they have so much between now and actually doing it. I'm sure the plans are going to change.
I hope so. Well, listen, I hope that's been a little bit fun. We can always do more another time if you want to come back on it. I love spouting off about things, even if I don't know much about them.
Well, I really appreciate it, Mike. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'm off to a wedding. Not
Yeah,
my own,
enjoy
my
your wedding
niece's.
in South Africa, your virtual wedding in South Africa. It sounds great. Thanks,
Right.
Nathan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.